It was one of those quiet Sunday mornings where time seemed to move just a little slower than usual. The sun peeked gently through the curtains, laying warm stripes of golden light across my living room carpet. The house was still, save for the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. I had just set a fresh loaf of bread to cool on the counter and poured myself a cup of tea when I heard the unexpected rapid knock at my front door. At first I assumed it might be the postman or a neighbor dropping by. But when I opened the door, I was greeted by the familiar sight of my grandson, Daniel. He stood there, his hair a little tousled from the breeze, his backpack hanging loosely off one shoulder. His cheeks were rosy from the morning air, and his eyes bright, curious. Always full of life, sparkled as he smiled at me. "Grandma, can I spend the afternoon with you?" He asked in that way only a child can hope for, yet certain that the answer would be yes. I blinked in mild surprise. Usually, our visits were planned ahead of time. His mother would call me earlier in the week, telling me when Daniel was free from soccer practice or after-school projects. But this time, he had come unannounced. It's like a happy little whirlwind blowing straight into my day. "Of course, dear," I said without hesitation, my heart softening immediately. "You know, you're always welcome." He stepped inside, tugging his backpack higher up his shoulder. The moment his shoes hit the entry rug, I caught the faint scent of crayons and bubblegum clinging to him, a mixture so distinctly, Daniel, that it always made me smile. I watched as he looked around the house, though he knew it well. The framed family photos along the hallway, the crocheted throw blankets draped across the sofa. The neat little stack of magazines on the side table lit was the same as it always had been. But children, I've learned, don't look at things quite the same way twice. Each visit was a new adventure in his eyes. "Did you have breakfast?" I asked, as I ushered him toward the kitchen. "Yeah, but not cookies," he replied with a grin, his eyes darting toward the tin I always kept on the counter. I laughed. I should have guessed. "Sit down, sweetheart. I'll put the kettle on." He slipped into his usual seat at the table, the one right by the window where the morning sun fell in a bright square. He swung his legs back and forth beneath the chair, humming some little tune under his breath as I bustled about the kitchen. It was all so ordinary, so beautifully ordinary that I didn't stop to think twice about it. I simply assumed this was like every other visit. He wanted to hear my stories, perhaps play a board game from the stack in the living room, or help me stir the soup for lunch. I thought I knew exactly how the day would go, just as I thought I knew exactly why he was here. When I set the plate of cookies down in front of him, his face lit up in that familiar way, and I felt a swell of warmth in my chest. My grandson was growing up so quickly, but in moments like these, I still saw the toddler who used to toddle around my kitchen floor, sticky hands reaching up for a biscuit. As I poured the tea, I asked lightly, "So, what brings you here today, my love? Did you just miss your old grandma?" He chuckled but didn't answer right away. Instead, he nibbled at the edge of a cookie, his expression thoughtful, almost hesitant. That struck me as unusual. Normally, Daniel would chatter away the moment he sat down, telling me about his friends, his favorite video games, or some funny thing his teacher had said. But today, there was a quietness about him, stillness that didn't match his usual energy. I didn't dwell on it, though. I simply assumed he was tired or distracted. After all, children have moods that change like the wind. And so, I sipped my tea, content to enjoy his company in silence for a while as I glanced at him across the table. I thought back to my own childhood visits with my grandmother. How comforting it had been to know that there was a place where I was always welcomed, always safe, always loved. I hoped Daniel felt the same way when he came here, that this house, with its worn wooden floors and faint scent of lavender polish, was a refuge for him too. "Would you like to play a game later?" I asked, trying to draw him out a bit. "I still have that puzzle we never finished last time." "Maybe," he said, his voice soft, almost distracted. That gave me pause. Puzzle solving was usually his favorite part of our afternoons. Yet he seemed distant, as though his mind were somewhere else entirely. I tilted my head, studying him more closely. There was a small crease between his brows, the kind of furrow that didn't belong on a child's face. Something was troubling him, something more than whether he wanted cookies or puzzles. But again, I brushed it aside, telling myself I was overthinking. Children sometimes look serious for no reason at all. They drift in and out of their own little worlds. So I didn't press him. Instead, I poured him a glass of milk to go with his cookies and settled into the chair opposite him. The clock ticked softly in the background, marking the minutes as we sat together in companionable quiet. I didn't know it then, but this was no ordinary visit. I thought my grandson had simply come over for cookies, stories, and a cozy afternoon with Grandma. I thought it would be a day like so many others we'd shared before. The kitchen was warm, filled with the comforting scent of fresh bread and the faint sweetness of the cookies on the table. A shaft of sunlight slanted through the lace curtains, spilling across Daniel's face as he sat there, slowly turning his cookie in his hands. For a moment, I simply enjoyed the sight of him, the way his hair curled just slightly at the ends, the way his sneakers tapped rhythmically against the legs of the chair. But something felt different. Normally, my grandson was like a little stream, babbling endlessly, carrying with him stories and laughter that bubbled out before I could even catch up. He usually started in the middle of a tale about a classmate, as a silly joke or an adventure from the schoolyard, and didn't stop until he'd spilled out every detail. Today, though, that stream had dried into silence. He nibbled on the edge of his cookie absent-mindedly, his gaze flickering toward me and then darting away. He drummed his fingers against the table in a soft rhythm, the kind of fidgeting that betrayed a storm of thought beneath the surface. "What's on your mind, dear?" I asked after watching him quietly for a while. He shrugged, though it was a heavy sort of shrug, weighed down with something unsaid. "Nothing," he mumbled, though his eyes betrayed him. I smiled gently. "Nothing usually doesn't make a boy sit so still. You look like you've been carrying a question in your pocket, and it's getting heavier by the minute." Daniel let out a short laugh, but it wasn't his usual laugh. It was nervous, shaky. He set the cookie back down on the plate and reached for his backpack, pulling it closer as if it were a shield. That was when I really knew something was different. My grandson only clung to his backpack in two situations: when he was hiding a surprise like a drawing he wanted to show me, or when he was hiding a worry. He opened the zipper halfway, peering inside but not taking anything out. His little brows knitted together and he hesitated. "Grandma?" he began, his voice soft, almost fragile. "Yes, sweetheart." I leaned closer, giving him my full attention. Can I ask you something? But you have to promise not to laugh." The way he said it, it wasn't playful. It wasn't the kind of "don't laugh" kids use before telling a silly joke. His tone was more serious, like he was about to peel back a layer of his heart he usually kept hidden. I reached across the table and laid my hand over his. "Of course, dear, I'd never laugh at you. Not about something important." He searched my face for a moment, as if weighing whether he could trust my words. His fingers tightened on the strap of his backpack. Then he looked down, staring at the cookie he hadn't touched. The silence stretched, broken only by the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. I didn't rush him. Children, and perhaps people of all ages, need time to gather courage before letting go of something that matters. He took a breath, then another, as though each inhale might help him gather the right words. His lips parted, but then he stopped again, shaking his head. "It's silly," he muttered. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "if it's on your heart, it's not silly. Not to me." That seemed to loosen something inside him. He let out a sigh, long and shaky, finally raised his eyes to meet mine. "You know how everyone talks about Grandpa sometimes?" he asked carefully. I felt a sudden stillness inside me. My husband and his grandfather had passed away years ago, when Daniel was still very young, too young to really remember him. Though his name was often mentioned in family conversations, Daniel rarely brought him up himself. I nodded slowly. "Yes, dear, I know." Daniel hesitated again, his small hands tracing circles on the table. "Well, I don't really remember him. Not like Mom does or like you do. I see his picture, and people tell me stories, but it's not the same. And I was wondering." He trailed off, biting his lip. His eyes shimmered with a kind of vulnerability I wasn't used to seeing in him. It made him look older and younger all at once, like a child standing on the threshold of understanding things too big for his years. My heart ached, though I kept my face calm for him. I reached again for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze of reassurance. You can ask me anything, Daniel. Anything at all? He took another deep breath, summoning the courage he'd been gathering since he walked through my door. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked the question that would change the rest of our afternoon. The silence stretched long and thin, like a thread pulled taut. Daniel sat across from me, his hands folded tightly in his lap now, as if he were holding himself together. His cookie lay abandoned on the plate, untouched. His backpack sat at his feet, the zipper still half open, a secret he hadn't yet revealed. Then, at last, he spoke. His voice was soft, wavering at the edges, but every word seemed to come straight from his heart. Grandma. What was Grandpa really like? Before he got sick? Did he ever talk about me? Before I was born? The question landed gently, but it rippled through me like a stone dropped in water. My breath caught in my chest. For a moment, I simply sat there, struck still by the weight of what he had asked. I had expected something entirely different, something about school. Maybe, or a silly argument with a friend. But this was deeper. This was the kind of question that doesn't come lightly to a child. It's the kind that lingers in the back of their mind until the ache of not knowing becomes too much to bear. My heart swelled with both love and sorrow. Love, because he wanted to know. Sorrow, because the person he most longed to know could not answer for himself. I reached across the table, laying my hand gently over his small one. His skin was warm, his fingers curled tightly, almost as if bracing for disappointment. "Oh, Daniel," I whispered. "That's not a silly question at all." He looked up at me then, his eyes wide and searching. There was a flicker of fear in them, as if he worried the answer might be painful, or worse, empty. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. How do you tell a child about the man who shaped so much of your life? The man whose absence still ached like a missing limb? How do you put into words the love of a grandfather he never truly got to know? I thought back to the years before Daniel's birth, before illness had cast its long shadow over our lives. Memories flooded in sunlit afternoons by the lake. The smell of wood shavings in the garage where his grandfather had built toys by hand. The hearty laughter that had filled every corner of this very kitchen. Your grandpa, I began slowly, was the kind of man who could make a whole room brighter just by walking into it. He had this big laugh-o. It wasn't quiet or polite, it was loud and full. The kind that made you laugh along whether you wanted to or not. And he was kind, Daniel. Kind in a way that people remembered. He always had time for anyone, always had a helping hand to offer. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes fixed on me, drinking in every word. And yes, I added, squeezing his hand gently, he talked about you. Even before you were born. His eyes widened. He did? I smiled, though my throat felt tight. All the time. When your mom first told us she was expecting, your grandpa could hardly contain himself. He used to talk about how he'd take you fishing, how he'd teach you to ride a bike. He even bought something for you, a toy car, long before we even knew if you were a boy or a girl. He said every kid should have a car to race across the floor. I could see the flicker of wonder on Daniel's face. The way his lips parted in surprise. His gaze dropped to the backpack at his feet, and he nudged it closer, though he didn't open it yet, did he? Did he really think about me? He asked softly, his voice almost trembling. Every single day, I said firmly, because it was the truth. He used to sit right here at this table and talk about the things he wanted to do with you. He couldn't wait to meet you, Daniel. You were already so loved before you even arrived. For a long moment, Daniel sat very still. His lashes trembled, as though he were blinking back tears, though he tried to hide it. He picked up his cookie again, but this time not to eat. He just held it, turning it in his fingers as though grounding himself. "Grandma," he whispered. "Sometimes I feel like I don't know him at all. Like everyone else has these stories, these memories, and I just have pictures. And sometimes I wonder if he would have liked me." Oh, my dear boy. My heart ached at the words. How could he ever doubt it? I reached across the table again, both hands cradling his now. "Daniel, your grandpa would have adored you. More than anything." He would have been so proud of the person you are. Do you want to know something? You remind me of him sometimes. The way you think before you speak, the way you care so much about people, you carry a piece of him with you, even if you don't remember him the way we do. His lips curved into the smallest smile, fragile but real. Really? Really, I nodded. There was a pause, a quietness that settled between us, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of quiet that follows truth when a question long held inside finally finds its answer. At last, Daniel reached down and tugged at his backpack. From inside, he pulled out a small notebook, its cover scuffed and worn from being carried everywhere. He flipped it open to a page filled with sketches, childish but full of care. In the center was a drawing of a man, tall with broad shoulders, standing beside a boy with curly hair. Above them, he had written, "Me and Grandpa." He slid it across the table, shy but hopeful. I drew this. I wasn't sure if it looked right. Do you think he would have liked it? Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I smiled through them. Oh, sweetheart, he would have loved it. He would have framed it and hung it right there on the wall for everyone to see. Daniel's shoulders eased, the tension melting away as relief and quiet pride filled his expression. He closed the notebook gently, tucking it back into his backpack as though it were a treasure. The room felt different after Daniel asked his question lighter. Somehow, as if a window had been opened to let in fresh air, his words had unlocked something, not just in him, but in me, too. For years, I had carried my husband's memory like a delicate glass, ornament precious, fragile, handled with care. Now, here was my grandson, reaching out for it. Asking not just for stories, but for a piece of the man he never got to meet. I reached for Daniel's hand again, holding it between mine. His fingers were small but strong, a young boy's hand still clinging to the softness of childhood. I wanted him to feel the certainty of my answer. Not just hear it, Daniel, I began softly. Your grandpa loved you long before you were born. Do you know what he used to say? He said that one day he'd be the one running beside you while you rode your first bike. He said he'd teach you to bait a hook at the lake, even though he always got more tangled in the line than the fish ever did. And he said this all the time, that being a grandpa would be the best job he ever had. Daniel's eyes widened, shimmering with wonder. He really said that? All the time I nodded, smiling at the memory. When your mom told us she was expecting, your grandpa got this twinkle in his eyes. He went out the very next day and bought something for you. I rose from my chair then, crossing to the old wooden cabinet in the corner. The cabinet was scratched with age, its doors sticking slightly when I pulled them open. Inside, tucked away in a small box lined with tissue paper, was the toy car. It was a simple thing, a little red car with chipped paint on one corner where it had bumped against the box all these years. I carried it carefully to the table and set it in front of Daniel. His breath caught. What's this? Your grandpa picked it out just for you, I said, my voice catching slightly. He didn't even know if you'd be a boy or a girl, but he said every child should have a toy car to race across the floor. He wanted you to have this, so that when the day came, you'd know he was already thinking of you. Daniel reached for the car slowly, reverently, as though afraid it might vanish if he touched it too quickly. His fingers closed around it, and he turned it over in his hands, tracing the little wheels and the chipped paint. His eyes glistened, though he tried to blink the tears away. He really bought this for me? He whispered. Yes, sweetheart, I said. He wanted you to have something from him, something that could last, even if he couldn't be here himself. Daniel set the car gently on the table, staring at it with a mixture of awe and sorrow. Then he looked up at me, his voice trembling. I wish I could have met him. I swallowed hard, my own eyes misting. I wish that too, more than anything. But you know what? In a way, you do know him. He's in the stories we tell, in the memories we keep alive. And he's in you. Every time you show kindness, every time you laugh so hard your shoulders shake, that's him. You're carrying him forward without even realizing it. For a moment, Daniel didn't say anything. He just held the car close to his chest, as though it were a piece of his grandfather he could finally touch. The kitchen was quiet, save for the ticking of the clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Yet in that silence, there was something powerful: connection, healing, love stretching across generations. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice steadier now. Grandma, will you tell me more about him? Like the funny things he did? Or the times he made you laugh? A smile tugged at my lips, even through the ache in my chest. Oh, I could tell you 100 stories and still have more left over. Like the time he tried to fix the lawnmower and ended up with half the engine scattered across the yard. Or the time he fell asleep in the hammock and nearly toppled right out when the dog jumped on him. He was always doing something silly, and he always made me laugh. Daniel chuckled. Genuine laugh this time, soft and bright. He sounds fun, he was, I agreed, and you would have loved each other dearly. We spent the next hour at the table. The cookies long forgotten, as I told him story after story. Some were simple like the way his grandpa